Hi, my name is Elliot Seguin. I'm experimental test pilot for Mooney International in Chino, California, and I'm here to talk to you about the Deadstick landing that we did at Reno a couple weeks ago. First off, appreciate Richard for you inviting me to give this talk. Mooney Summit, it sounds like a fantastic event, and I'm only jealous that I didn't get to attend. So the event that you saw on that video in the context of mission rules, which is something that Richard talks about, which I like a lot, and I think plays well with the sort of flight test decision-making mindset that I was taught becoming a test pilot. So for me, the way I look at it is you're just trying to do as much of the decision making on the ground before you're in that time critical moment of the actual emergency. So rather than deciding what the individual steps will be, you make a bigger decision of what kind of an emergency am I dealing with, and then you just use the appropriate checklists for that day. So in the video that you just watched, as far as I'm concerned, there are sort of 4 different decision making points in that video. The first of which comes right at the beginning. So basically it's the first day of qualifying. This is my second qualifying lap, so that means I already have done 1 qualifying lap, which means I have a time in the box. So the second qualifying lap is just gravy, just to see if you can get it to go just a little bit faster, assuming of course you're confident that you didn't cut a pylon. So in this case, I was just sort of sitting in the cockpit waiting for a reason to go ahead and pull off the course and save my engine and increase the chances that I'll get to fly for the whole week. So sitting in the cockpit, any sort of indication from the engine, I was going to go ahead and pull off. So in this case, we had a drop in manifold pressure, went from race manifold pressure down to about 55 inches, which is a relatively big drop, which has some things that the pilot needs to do. But the first decision was to go ahead and right the wings, pull the nose about 15 degrees up, and exit the course. So that's a big decision. You know, we talk a lot about denial in an emergency situation. By pitching off the course, I know as a pilot I'm sort of done having fun for the day, which is sort of the hardest part about any emergency, that denial of that moment, that maybe the airplane is actually broken, and 2, it's not going to heal itself. So by pitching up, then you can see in the cockpit I start working the liquids problem. So the short answer being we just lost a bunch of air going into the motor, so we have to correspondingly adjust the ADI and fuel that's going in the motor to match that. So trucking uphill, we come across the second decision-making point of the day, which was sort of when we went from, the first step being, we went from we're done racing for the day to we're done flying for the day, or even a little bit more than that. We really need to get down just as quick as we can. That came with the first significant vibration in the cockpit. I could feel it shaking me around. I could feel it in the flight controls. Also, there's the backfiring. So backfiring of a turbocharged motor is a very strange thing to experience, a big warning sign to the pilot. And then finally, the smoke in the cockpit. So all those things sort of point to stuff is breaking in the front of the airplane. The airplane's sort of coming apart, and I am no longer interested in sitting in the seat. We need to go ahead and get out of the cockpit. So in that case, I pick a runway. So you can see I look to runway 14, make the decision that that's where I'm going, key the microphone, call the firefighters. Race 33 has a mayday. We're going to runway 14, so now the trucks know where to go. And then the last thing was, with the smoke in the cockpit, the decision to keep the propeller forward, which doubles the drag of the airplane and minimizes the amount of time the pilot's going to have to sit in that seat exposed to the smoke and all the rest of the things that may be getting ready to happen. So that's the second decision-making point. The third decision-making point was when to throw out the gear. So we've just doubled the drag of the airplane by keeping the propeller up. Then by throwing the gear out, we almost double the drag again. So we want to get down fast, so we want to throw that gear out as soon as we can, but we really don't want to land short. It's much better to run off the far end of the runway at, say, 20 miles an hour than to land short of the runway at 150 miles an hour. Much more survivable in the former. So that decision of when do we know we have enough energy to add the drag of the gear and still make the runway. So in the case of the video, you can see I make that just as the runway's coming into view, runway 14 is coming into view as I'm on base turn, throw the gear out, and that's the third decision-making point. The fourth decision-making point comes down to how to egress the airplane. There's sort of the casual, I had an emergency, but the airplane's fine. I'm going to take my time getting out of the airplane, getting unstrapped, making sure I have all my personal effects, and dealing with the firefighters, letting them know I'm not in a big hurry and therefore not worried. Or the other is, in this case, we had smoke coming out of the right side of cowling as we decelerated through about 60 knots indicated on the ground roll. And so the question was no longer how we're going to get out, but how can we get out even faster? So we went to that sort of emergency egress checklist, which meant, you know, turning things off faster, focusing more on how can we get out of the cockpit, and then we'll deal with the firefighters later. So that's sort of the 4 major decision-making waypoints from that flight. It ends up being a pretty textbook mayday, and the fact this is a very common thing that happens at Reno. You run the engines very hard, they fail, and you have to do a dead stick. But I think that mindset, or the idea of knowing what to do before you get in a situation where you have to do it, rather than assuming that the idea will come to you in that magic moment, is critical to surviving operating an airplane like a Mooney, or really any of these high performance, complex go-go airplanes that are so much freaking fun to operate because they're so complicated. But because they're so complicated, you end up having lots of nasty box cannons you can put yourself in when you have to do things quickly. So thanks for watching the video. If you get a chance to watch it again, feel free to send me an email either through my Facebook page, Wasabi Air Racing is the Facebook page, or my email address, elliotsiguin@gmail.com, with any sort of notes, things you see in the video that we could have done better. There's about 15 items that we put on the list, things that could have been done better that day that we just carry for ourselves. If you see any of those things, like I said, please send them along, but do me a favor, don't tell Richard about them. He seems to think I'm a good pilot and also has somehow access to F-16, something I'm insanely jealous of. So do me a favor and try to keep him thinking that I know what I'm doing. Thanks for your time, and airplanes are cool.